Warning, the following contains images of graphic violence and not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Female serial killers are highly uncommon. In the past decade, only about 5% of the serial killers apprehended identified as female. Today we are going to look at the life and crimes of Lavinia Fisher, who is believed to be the first female serial killer apprehended in the United States. Lavinia was born in 1793. She lived with her husband John in Charleston, South Carolina. The couple owned an inn called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House, which they managed into the early 1800s. The couple was very popular in Charleston, and many locals stayed at their inn to support the couple. The local police were alerted that the inn guests were often disappearing. Due to a lack of evidence, the complaints were just that, complaints. Lavinia would go into town and invite single travelers to stay at her inn to talk to them about their life and occupations. She wanted to determine if the travelers had money on their person. If Lavinia felt that the traveler had a large sum of money on their person, she would lace their tea with poison and send them to their room for the night. Later on, while they were asleep or suffering from their poison, feeling sick, vomiting, things like that, John would then sneak into the room and kill the traveler and take anything that they had. There is also a theory that Lavinia would only lace the tea with a drug that would make the traveler sleep. Then she would pull a lever in the bed that would collapse and the victim would fall into a pit of spikes. This has never been proven, and there is no documentation that the building had such a device. Because this case is so old, it can be a challenge to find a lot of proper documentation about Lavinia and John, and there are a lot of local legends regarding this case, and many of them aren't true, but it's hard to determine exactly what is true fully about this case, but we do know that Lavinia and John did kill people at their inn. In the Charleston Post and Courier, which is the daily newspaper in Charleston, they claimed that a vigilante gang went to the 6 Mile to stop the disappearances that were allegedly occurring at the inn. This happened in February 1819, and the group believed that they had accomplished their task by frightening Lavinia and John. The group left behind a man named David Ross to keep an eye on the inn. The next morning, Lavinia attacked David. She choked him and smashed his head through a window in her hotel. David was able to escape though, and he did alert the police about Lavinia and John. Shortly after this incident, a traveler named John Peoples asked Lavinia if the inn had any vacancies. She told him no, but welcomed him for some tea and a place to rest for the afternoon. Lavinia offered John tea, but he dumped his cup on the floor when she wasn't looking because he did not like tea, but he didn't want to offend Lavinia. She questioned him about his occupation, family, and what he was doing traveling all afternoon, and eventually she discovered she did in fact have a room available. John became suspicious of Lavinia. He was worried that she may try to rob him because of all the questions that she was asking him all afternoon. So in his room, he slept in a wooden chair that was next to the bed, and in the middle of the night when it was very dark, he heard a loud noise in his room, a loud creak on the floor, and he saw an outline of somebody in the dark. So he jumped out of the window and was able to alert the police. Police now had 2 accounts of attempted murder on Lavinia and John. When police raided the hotel, John gave up the names of other criminals in town in an attempt to protect Lavinia from being arrested. The couple were in prison almost an entire year between their arrest and execution. During their initial arraignment, they both pleaded not guilty, but the judge ordered that they would be held in prison until their trial. He believed they would run off with one of their co-conspirators. With further investigation done by law enforcement, they discovered that the inn was a hotspot for criminal activity. Along with the other travelers and families who stayed at the hotel, they would allow criminals to stay in the rooms and conduct business if they needed to. During the trial, the judge and jury did not believe that Lavinia and John were innocent and found them guilty of highway robbery, which was a capital offense at the time. They could not find the couple guilty of any murders, as they could not find any bodies and there was no evidence in the inn of any type of homicide or murders. Couple were given a reprieve until the following court date, meaning the judge allowed them to leave the prison and stay in a guarded housing cell. The couple attempted to escape the cell they stayed in, but it wasn't heavily guarded, and they devised a plan to break out of prison. On September 13th, they decided to execute this plan, but it failed immediately. They fashioned a rope out of the linens that were in their cell, and John was able to climb out of the window, but the rope broke, and so Lavinia was stuck in the room. John refused to leave her and stayed outside of the cell, outside of the prison wall, so he was rearrested and taken back to a cell, and they were given much tighter security after this. On February 4th, 1820, Lavinia and John were both sentenced to be hanged. John became religious during his time in prison, and Lavinia became more angry. On the day of their execution, John made a final attempt for his life. He asked Reverend Furman to read a letter stating that he had become a Christian and he could not be executed while there were lies against him. He then told the onlookers he was innocent and asked God for mercy for those who had done him wrong in the judicial process. This did not work on law enforcement, and John was still hung. Lavinia, however, had become very delusional while in prison, as she believed that she would be pardoned right up until the time that she was hung. Her last words were, quote, "If any of you have a message for the devil, tell him now, for I shall be seeing him shortly," end quote. She then jumped off the side of the stand and killed herself. Historians and investigators alike have started to look at the legitimacy of this case. Many feel that because Lavinia did not actually kill anybody, that she should not be considered a serial killer and that she should not have been hung. Although there is some documentation that they are not able to tell if it's legitimate, if it's actually from the court or not, or if it's something that maybe somebody else nearby in the town, wrote about in a book or something like that, that Lavinia did kill people and that she killed a lot of people. And so it's very hard to determine this case, although many people do consider her a serial killer. The couple was only convicted of tricking travelers and stealing their money and stealing any belongings that they had, and they were not convicted of any sort of homicide or murder. There was no documentation for that on the trial records. So this means that they were basically hung for stealing. And because of this reason, a lot of people compare this to the Charles Manson case and the Charles Manson murders. Because Charles Manson didn't actually kill anybody, he got his followers to do it. He got someone else to do it. And so from what I think and what I'm reading about with this case, I do believe Lavinia maybe had John under some sort of like love spell, if you will. He really loved her, and so he was willing to do her will for her, and he was willing to kill for her. But I do believe that she had a bigger part in it than what is documented. Of course, in older cases like this, it's hard to find a lot of information, but I do feel like Lavinia did have a major part in it. And even if she only poisoned somebody, that could have still killed them. The death of these people just happened quicker because John physically went in the room and would kill them after she already poisoned them, but most likely they would have died anyway by, choking or, having some other issues to do with the poison. So I do believe that she should still be considered a serial killer because she did some very evil things as well. Historians have also discovered Lavinia was an active member of a gang of highwaymen who committed many more crimes, including murder and robbery, outside of Charleston. It is still unclear to historians if the 6 Mile Inn was actually used as a hotel, or if Lavinia and John simply hid outlaws from police capture. So what do you all think about this case? Do you think that Lavinia was a murderer and did much more heinous things than what is documented and she was just good at hiding it? Or do you think John committed all the murders and he is actually the serial killer here? I really do feel, though, that Lavinia was much more a part of it than what is documented. I do feel that maybe, they just didn't keep records very well, but I do feel like there is a little bit more to this case than meets the eye, and that is why Lavinia is regarded as the first apprehended female serial killer of America.